Welcome to Twin Talk. This is Joy, and I'm here with my sister Angie. And Angie, it's been quite a while since we've done a podcast, so what's been going on? How come we haven't done a podcast in so long?
That's a great question. I don't know. I don't have a really good excuse, do you?
Not really. Just being out for summer. I've been trying to declutter my house and just spend time with my daughter, so
Yeah.
I guess podcasts have kind of been on the back burner.
Yeah, it does seem like I've just been really, really busy this last month.
Yeah.
I really have had a lot going on.
Well, tell the listeners what's been going on with you. Things have been pretty crazy in your life lately.
Okay, so I did have an epiphany about our podcast and reading in general, and this is so. You ever just have a thought and you think, "Wow, I've just never thought of that before."
Yeah.
So I've been trying to read this book, The Last Green Valley, which is what we're discussing today. And this last month of my life has been fairly crazy. Just had a lot of odd things happen in my life.
Right.
And it just hit me. So all during that time, well, just for instance, that we had a flood in the city that I work in. There's a lot of families who were displaced. Well, we ended up taking one of those families into my home.
Right.
It was a great family. They were wonderful, but pretty stressful.
Yeah.
Having a family live with you is very stressful.
And that just reminds me, I was going to try to help her out with a family, with cooking, cleaning, and their house was totally flooded, helping cleaning out their house. But I just happened to be going on a mission trip to Nicaragua.
Yes.
Which that's a whole nother podcast in itself. So I was, the whole week that she had this family in her house, I was in another country and not able to help her.
Yes, and the whole time I was going, Joy, come back, I need you.
I know, I felt bad not being here to help.
And so Joy was in Nicaragua. I'm here trying to host a family who has lost everything. And then it's funny, our older sister Sherry she happened to be in Florida that week. Well, she came back, I think she had just gotten back from Florida. Anyway, she was talking about how you guys are out saving the world and I'm laying on the beach. I thought that was funny.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I said all that to say this. Oh, and the other thing was my dog was recently diagnosed with a life-threatening disease, and so I was
horrible.
I was dealing with that. We literally thought he was getting ready to die, but he had a blood transfusion. We have a wonderful vet who used his Labradoodle dog and gave him a blood transfusion, and he's doing wonderful. And then on top of that, my son had this horrible poison ivy. He had to go to the doctor. It was so bad. And then you just name it, one thing after another.
That's true. I feel like you went through it. Yeah, last month you've been through it.
And so this is what's funny, and I'm tying this in with our podcast now. So I would be driving. Most of the time I listen to our audiobooks on my way to work, at my lunch hour sometimes, and on my way home.
Right.
Well, and I would catch myself rewinding because I had so much on my mind that I couldn't concentrate on the book. So this was a great book. I'll go ahead and say it now, but I'll tell you, my experience reading this book was not normal. Like, I'm saying, if any other time in my life, if I had read this book, I would have had a different experience. So have you ever just thought about that?
Whatever's going on in your life, whatever circumstances or stress or whatever, does affect, because we listen to most of our books.
It affects your overall experience of the book.
It affects your concentration. If I'm super stressed or have a lot going on, it's really hard for me to concentrate and really listen to the book.
Right, and so it just hit me. I always have these visions of laying on a beach reading a book. Well, I think that's the reason that image comes to my mind so much, because subconsciously I know that's one of the few times I can actually really enjoy a book.
Yes.
When you have no distractions and you don't have life getting in the way.
Right.
So just the fact that you and I read so many books as we do with life going on, everything that throws your way, it's a wonder that we really get a lot of these books that we do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that makes sense.
It's pretty impressive that we're, with our lives as crazy and busy as they usually are, that we can do so many books.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, that's I was just kind of having those epiphanies that your life and what's going on really does affect your overall experience of reading a book.
Yes, it really does. That's why sometimes I'll go back and reread a book because I'm like, I didn't really get to really get into it and enjoy it and pay attention to it. Like, it didn't have my full attention.
Yes, thank you. That was very well put. So, yeah.
A little background on this book. I just was walking through the hallway one morning or evening or afternoon, I can't remember. And I heard a couple of teachers in the hall talking, and there's an English teacher there, and she was talking about this book called The Last Green Valley, and she was just on and on about how good it was and how much she loved it. It was one of the best books she's read in a long time. So, of course, I had to look it up, and it was on Audible, and I told Angie about it, so we both listened to it on Audible. And I'm going to go ahead and read the overview. So The Last Green Valley is a book written by Mark Sullivan, and it was published in May of 2021, so it's relatively new. In late March 1944, as Stalin's forces push into Ukraine, young Emil and Adelina Martel must make a terrible decision. Do they wait for the Soviet Bear's intrusion and risk being sent to Siberia? Or do they reluctantly follow the wolves, murderous Nazi officers who have pledged to protect pure-blood Germans? The Martels are one of many families of German heritage whose ancestors have farmed in Ukraine for more than a century. But after already living under Stalin's horrifying regime, Emil and Adelina decide they must run and retreat from their land with the wolves they despised to escape the Soviets and go in search of freedom. Caught between two warring forces and overcoming horrific trials to pursue their hopes of immigrating to the West, the Martel story is a brutal, complex, and ultimately triumphant tale that illuminates the extraordinary power of love, faith, and one family's incredible will to survive and see their dreams realized. So it was a very powerful story. A lot of stuff happened. We couldn't even scratch the surface probably in one podcast. But I was going to ask you, are there any particular characters or scenes from the book that made an impression on you?
Yeah, and just as you were reading that, the thought went through my head. So, like, at the beginning of the book, they let you know this is based on a true...
Oh, yes. I should have
family.
clarified that. This is historical fiction. Mm-hmm. It is based on tons of research, and I think it's the grandsons of the Martels that are retelling the story. And, of course, he says, he just tries to make the conversations as realistic as they can be. They weren't there to hear the conversations, but they put them in context and say he tries to put in the characters' mouths things that are likely to have been said, things that are likely to have happened. So we don't know for sure every single thing, was that true, but the majority of it does retell the truth of what happened.
Yeah, so what I kept catching myself forgetting that this was based on a true story. Mm-hmm. And so I think if I would have reminded myself throughout the book that a lot of this actually happened, I think it would have been, not that it wasn't fascinating already, but it would have been more fascinating if I would have remembered that fact. Okay, so you asked, was there any scenes or anything in the book that stuck out to me? So the one thing that stuck out to me was, of course, we're in World War II, and it's like toward the end of the war. And the thing that really stuck out to me was like so at one point in the book, the main character, the wife, Adelina, her husband, he's taken prisoner and he's not with her, and it's just her and the boys. And at night, there were certain nights where all the military men would have a night off, and they would go basically get drunk, and basically any woman was fair game.
Yeah.
And so,
from my understanding from the book, the Russians, it was kind of an unwritten rule. The Russians military guys were basically told, you are allowed to have any German woman you want.
Right.
At certain periods of time.
Yeah, there was especially...
It was a free-for-all. If it's a German woman, she's yours.
Yeah, and it was like a Friday or Saturday night, I don't remember. There was a particular day of the week that they would all go out and get drunk, and they would look for women. And she and a lot of the other women had found an old church that they would take sanctuary in, and they were hiding in there, and most of the men couldn't figure out where they were going. And that scene really struck me.
It was horrible, and I believe that part's true, and I just think it's horrible to be a woman living in those times. And so many of the women didn't have their husbands to protect them because they were either in these war camps like Siberia, or they had been killed in the war, or it was horrible.
The
they
men
didn't have
just
protection.
Weren't around to protect them.
The men weren't around to protect the wives, and it was really sad. One thing that stood out to me was there was one part where Emil, one of the main characters, like they said, they're fleeing the Russians and following the Germans, just trying to get out of the war territory and go west and try to find some sort of a peaceful life. But anyway, he's basically he's captured, and he said, look, you've got to prove that you're a good German. That the German soldiers, the Nazis, were telling him, you've got to prove yourself to us that you're a good German. And they brought him to this town where they were killing Jews. And I think it said it took 4 days to kill the Jews, all these thousands of Jews. And they put a gun in his hand and they said, shoot. And I think it was 2 little girls and their dad. And he just struggled and struggled because he knew if he didn't kill them, he would be killed. And he wanted to get back to his wife and kids. And I won't say what happened, just in case anybody reads the book. But I just thought to myself, if someone put a gun in my hand and said, you have to shoot the people in front of you or you will be killed. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
And
I think I would do the right thing and say, I'm not going to do it. But you never know until you're in that situation.
Yeah, and what kept going through my mind was he knew they were going to be killed regardless if he did it or not.
Yes.
And I'm playing devil's advocate here because I'm not saying it's ever right to kill a human being, but I kept thinking, man, if I was in that situation, that probably would go through my head. They're going to die anyway.
Yeah, and that's what I think that did go through the character's head. I think he did say, well, if I don't do it, the guy behind me's going to do it.
Right.
So what's it matter? They're going to be killed anyway.
Right. And then that goes back to your beliefs. Like, for me personally, I think, well, I personally am not going to have their blood on my hands.
Right.
So, regardless of who kills them, I don't want it to be on me.
Right.
That's how I would look at it.
So that was a very strong scene. Another one was his sister, what was her name? Risa.
I had a really hard time keeping up with the names.
Yeah, it's a pretty big family, and they're all traveling together and trying to escape all the war and everything. But anyway, there's a scene where she is trying to climb back on the train that's taking him west, and she falls and basically gets she gets caught on between the tracks on the train, and both of her legs get cut off below the knee, and that whole scene of them having to cauterize her legs and her screaming, and there's something else that happens there that I won't say, but it was horrific. And those are just 2 examples of things that happened in the book that are just horrific that they had to face because of the war.
Yeah, that was an awful part of the book.
Did you have anything else, any other characters or scenes that stood out to you?
They had 2 young boys, and my heart just kept going out for those boys because they were, throughout the book, they're saying, Mama, I'm hungry. Mama, I'm tired.
Yeah.
And there was nothing they could do for them.
Oh, no, that was heartbreaking. I'm hungry. I'm tired.
Yeah. Mama, where are we going? When are we going to get somewhere? Can we go back home?
Yes.
And they couldn't.
That was heartbreaking. Mm-hmm. So we're just hitting the surface here. Mm-hmm. I mean, there are so many stories and so many things that happen. And I do highly recommend. Here's one thing that was unique to me about the book, and I'm sure there's a lot of books like this, but it seems like most of the World War II books I read are from the Jewish perspective. It's always about the Holocaust and the different individual Jewish families or individuals and what all the horrific things they faced. And those are good books, and we've read a lot of them. But this one was from a German family's point of view, and they were not Nazis, and they were not in favor of killing, and they were not in favor. They were just simple farmers living in Ukraine, right? And they just wanted a peaceful life. They didn't want to deal with politics. They didn't want anything to do with the Nazis. Yet they were forced in the middle of all this stuff. So I just thought the book was unique, and that it was from the German family's point of view.
Yeah, I have to say, so growing up, we're basically fed stories from history books, right? Mm-hmm. And so, you learn all the facts. You learn who were the Allies, who were the Axis. You learned who won, who were the leaders, in the major. But you're never told, and you never think about the millions of individual families that had their own story to tell.
Right.
And so that's why I liked reading this book, because it reminded me, okay, all those millions of people were made up of families who had children, who had lives, but you don't really think about it individually. You just think of it as a whole, as a war. But like this book reminded me, okay, there were people who had struggles and suffered tremendously through this war, and like you said, just because a family was German didn't automatically make them bad.
Right. And I think it's so unjust and unfair that so many, people automatically hear someone's German. And I don't think that stereotype's still around today. But back then, like Emil, at one of the scenes, he was a soldier being led through a town, and people were spitting on him and calling him every name in the book, and you dirty Nazi, and just assuming the Russians had him as a German prisoner of war. This is another story. But anyway, they automatically assumed that he was part of the killing and part of the Nazi party. So a lot of Germans suffered and were just categorized as these monsters when they had nothing to do with it.
And because of them traveling like through Russia, through Ukraine, through Germany, depending on where they were at, determined on who they had to pretend they were.
Yes, that's so true. They just did whatever they could. I'm not judging them. I probably would have done something. So if they're in Germany,
if they're with Russians, they're
we're
like, okay,
going to
we
be
need to speak
loyal to
Russian.
Hitler. Yeah, if we're in Russia, then we're not going to say anything about Stalin. I mean, they had to adapt to survive.
Yeah, it was a constant, like being chameleons. They had to, wherever, it's like, okay, wherever we're at, we have to act this way and be a certain way to be safe.
Yeah.
You know?
So how many green valleys would you give this book?
Well, it's a great book because of my state of mind, I'm just going to give it like 4 green valleys.
Oh, I think that's good.
I mean, that is good because it was a great book. But I mean, this is no reason to give a book less of a rating, but it was so depressing, and you don't give a book a bad rating because it's depressing.
There's so many horrific stories and so many sad things that happen. It's a hard read.
Yeah, and there were so many things, like I mentioned earlier, I was going through a lot in my life, and I thought, I kind of like the last thing I read, a book I need to read right now is something that's even more depressing. And so I kept thinking, I kind of wish we were reading a more upbeat book.
Yeah.
It kind of, but
timing wasn't the greatest.
Timing wasn't the greatest. But anyway, like I said, I could probably read that book again next year under different circumstances. I'd probably have a totally different perspective. Yeah, different. Yeah.
So who do you think would enjoy reading this book?
I feel like people who have German ancestry, people and anyone who has any type of connection or ancestors who lived through World War II, I think they would think that would really.
I agree, and I think anyone who likes historical fiction, anyone, especially if you're interested in the World War II era, I think you would especially enjoy reading it.
Yeah.
So. Okay, so the reason it was called The Last Green Valley is Adelina had seen a real pretty picture. I think it was a house nestled at the bottom of a mountain, and it was in a green valley with like a creek or river running through it. It's like a picturesque, setting out of a book. And so every time the boys would ask her, Mama, where are we going to live? Where are we going? And she'd tell them, we're going to a beautiful green valley. And she would describe that picture. And this is where my memory's getting horrible, but isn't that where they ended up? I think that was part of the miracle.
I know. I want to tell about the ending and about her Green Valley. But
they end up in Montana. They end up in Billings, Montana, I think.
Yeah.
But, the ending's awesome.
The ending is awesome.
Another huge theme was Emil had lost his faith in God. He questioned God through the whole thing.
Yeah.
His whole viewpoint was, how could God let this happen? How could God let that happen? A just God wouldn't let my sister's legs get cut off. A just God wouldn't let us almost starve. And then Adelina had the opposite view. Oh, thank you, God, for providing this meal when we were about to starve. Oh, thank you, God, that you saved Reese's life and she didn't die. She always took the Christian view and the God view. And what's so cool, she was kind of redeemed in the end because she does get her Green Valley, and it's awesome.
And it's funny because that is a theme throughout the book, is her Christian faith and her strong belief in God. And I for some reason, I saw a review on this, and the person said, if I wanted to be preached to, I wouldn't have read this book.
Ooh,
They
really?
said something about being preached to.
I never thought about it.
No.
I thought about it as both perspectives.
Yes.
There was a perspective that there is no God, and there's a perspective from the wife that, yes, there definitely is.
So when I read that review, I immediately thought, no, I never
didn't feel
felt
like it's being preachy at all. Matter of fact, I thought it gave a very balanced view of how one viewed the war as no God exists, and the other one viewed everything that happened as God exists. And I thought that was what was so interesting, to see how he viewed each incident and how she viewed each incident.
I thought it was very balanced, not preachy at all.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to get deep here. I've asked Angie to describe. So Adelina's Green Valley was this, where they're going to live, their forever home, and it's this beautiful green valley with the mountains, snow-capped mountains, and the water, and it's peaceful and things like that. So Angie, Were you prepared for this? Did you see this?
Yes.
Okay,
but
you're looking your face.
I'm not exactly sure. Do you mean literally? Like,
Well, I said, describe your Green Valley. Like, where would be your forever home, your perfect place? And it can be where you live now. I mean,
you said you are mean literally.
Yeah,
where would be my dream place to
literally.
live?
That was
Okay.
her dream.
Okay.
Was that beautiful Green Valley with the mountains and the water, and they said they could fish all day, and she said she'd have a big garden. I mean, that was like her dream space. Do you have a Green Valley?
Well, I mean, it's funny because oh gosh, I love so many different settings. So like my dream would be to live by the ocean.
Right.
But I also want to live on a mountain and actually look over a valley like that. And it's funny because when she was describing that Green Valley, you know what came to my mind? So when we were kids, we had a bus route that was like an hour long. And there was one place, and it was kind of up on the top of a really high hill. I wouldn't call it a mountain. And Joy and I, we were on the bus, and we had to turn around at this one place. But it turned around, and where it turned around, you could see, looked over this beautiful Green Valley.
Yeah, that's true.
And down in the valley, you could see little houses and little roads. And it was, and in my opinion, that was one of the most beautiful scenic spots around here. It's not even that far from where we live.
Right.
It's grown up now. The trees, you can't really see it. But anyway, when she was describing that, I thought, wow, we kind of have a Green Valley here. But yeah, I would definitely love to live at a place where I could look down and see the one that's described in the book.
Yeah.
Heck yeah.
My Green Valley, I'm kind of like you. I'd like to live by the ocean. I'd love to have a cabin in the mountains. I would love to live by a lake or a river. But we went to we rented a house in Jasper, Arkansas. That literally looked over a Green Valley, and I fell in love with this house. It's I think it's probably my dream house as far as the balcony that looks out over the valley.
Awesome.
I could sit on that valley all day. And honestly, I think if I had to pick, I think I would love to live there. I think that would be my Green Valley.
That was awesome.
So.
I just have to tell our listeners, Joy is holding her little baby Tucker, and she just keeps kind of rocking him, and he's literally going to sleep while we're sitting here talking. He is the most precious little baby
so
dog.
Sweet.
Okay. Sorry.
Well, we're about to end this, but I do want to mention to Angie and to our listeners, this was not his first historical novel. His first historical novel was called Beneath the Scarlet Sky, and I do want Angie to read it if she ever gets a chance. But warning to the listeners and to you, it's similar to The Last Green Valley in that there's so much heartache. It's the same deal. It's about this guy. It's World War II, and it goes through his whole life. Now, this same English teacher that recommended The Last Green Valley, I asked her about this Beneath the Scarlet Sky is the name of his first historical novel, and she said, I just don't believe that guy. She said, I don't believe all that stuff happened. She said, I think he's a liar.
Really?
And a self-promoter.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't know if she actually used the term liar, but she was very negative. She said, I just don't know. And it's funny that she said that because I never really doubted any of the story. It all seemed what's the word I'm looking for? Like
reasonable,
plausible. Yes, to me it all seemed. I mean, there were some pretty crazy stories in there, but there were also in The Last Green Valley.
And how many times in life you hear, truth is stranger than fiction? So many times,
and that's what. So even though she didn't like it, I really liked it, and I just want to read the review. So. Maybe the listeners, y'all can decide for yourself if you want to listen to it or read it or not. But I thought it was a really good book. And I mean, some of the stuff in there, I'm like, wow, that really happened, So this is it. It's called Beneath the Scarlet Sky. Pino Lella wants nothing to do with the war or the Nazis. He's a normal Italian teenager obsessed with music, food, and girls, but his days of innocence are numbered. When his family home in Milan is destroyed by Allied bombs, Pino joins an underground railroad helping Jews escape over the Alps and falls for Anna, a beautiful widow 6 years his senior. In an attempt to protect him, Pino's parents force him to enlist as a German soldier, a move they think will keep him out of combat. But after Pino is injured, he is recruited at the tender age of 18 to become the personal driver for Adolf Hitler's left hand in Italy. General Hans Lyers, one of the Third Reich's most mysterious and powerful commanders. Now, with the opportunity to spy for the Allies inside the German High Command, Pino endures the horrors of the war and the Nazi occupation by fighting in secret, his courage bolstered by his love for Anna and for the life he dreams they will one day share. So even if only half of the story were true,
That sounds
Angie,
pretty interesting.
it's
Yeah.
very, to me, I liked it just as much or maybe even more as The Last Green Valley.
Yeah.
And once again, he has a disclaimer. He says, this is historical fiction. I've done all the research I can. He says a lot of the records were destroyed in fires, that the between both of the sides, the Nazis and the Soviets, went around destroying things that would show their criminal activity. So he said a lot of stuff he couldn't. He heard it from Pino Lella and his family members, but he couldn't verify a lot of it because the records had been destroyed.
That's interesting. I never thought about all the records being destroyed.
And then people were coming out of the woodwork going, oh, he claims to have gone to this boys' camp in the summer. And then there was someone who went there and said, I don't remember this guy, and he's not in any of my pictures. And there's controversy.
Yeah.
But anyway, even if only half of it were true, it is an incredible story.
Wow.
So I highly recommend. It's called Beneath the Scarlet Sky. So that was his first one. And then The Last Green Valley was his second book, Mark Sullivan. And anyway, I highly recommend them both. So
Okay.
Well, did you have any closing thoughts or anything else you want to say?
I just want to do a plug for, so we did Where the Crawdads Sings previously.
Right.
And it's getting ready to come out in theaters.
Oh, right. And we're planning on going to see that movie.
Yeah, so let's just hope that the movie is half as good as the book was. And what's funny is I'm seeing so many comments on Facebook from people talking about it coming out. And you don't think, I always just think, oh, people don't know anything about it. You forget, that other people read too. You know what I'm saying? I always just think no one reads as much as we do. But apparently they do, because a lot of people are talking about how the book's coming out.
And I actually kind of want to go back and reread the book before we see it, because it's been a while.
I went back and listened to our podcast about it just to kind of refresh my memory. So anyway, I just wanted to say that Where the Crawdads Sing, find it in our list of podcasts if you want to listen there, and go see it. It's coming out in movie theaters July 15th, I believe.
Yeah, and hopefully the movie is half as good as the book.
Yeah. And also join us for our next podcast. We're going to be discussing The Gray King.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next time on Twin Talk.